How's everyone holding up? It's very rare in today's world to have a speaking fest, other than TEDx's maybe. Speaker after speaker after speaker, without a break, without a musical accompaniment. But my dad was a talker, and so we are celebrating his life through stories and talking. And so I hope everyone is still patient and with us and enjoying the different elements. And I think we'll just move forward. We have about another 3 or 4 different stories, and then we will move in to the reception. So I thank you all for your patience and your listening. A beloved and longtime colleague of my father, Rabbi Steve Einstein, is now the senior rabbi of Orange County. I think you gained that title last year, right? You're wearing it well. Beautiful. My father, they say, was the only one who was allowed to call him Stevie. And it's my honor to now invite Rabbi Steve Einstein to come to the bima.
First, a word to Rabbi Asa, Rabbi Ariel Asa. It must have been tough growing up in that household with all these outstanding sisters. But I'm sure your mom has already told you, but I will say as a lover of your family and a colleague that the unveiling ceremony was as perfect as could be. Very beautiful. I had the great honor of standing here a year ago together with Rabbi Elazar Muskin to deliver the 2 major eulogies of that day. And so today I'm going to really spare you. We have so many wonderful stories that we're hearing, and I'm going to do my best. This is hard for a rabbi. But to really limit myself. Really, there is so much that could be said. Chaim Asa was a man of very strong opinions. I could see that nobody here was surprised by that characterization. As you shall hear, I really want to tell one story, but I'm going to get to it a little bit through the back door. 2 weeks ago, I had occasion to visit a synagogue in Omaha, Nebraska, and to meet with the staff there as well as the board leadership. And I reconnected with somebody I had known many years ago when she was growing up here in Orange County. When I say here, I really mean here. In those days, her name was Debbie Mell. Her name is now Debbie Messerano. And she told me a story, and it ties in directly with the incident from Chaim's life that really and truly stands out for me. And it is how important going to Camp Swig was for her. And she told me how Rabbi Asa had made it possible, as my dear friend and colleague Rabbi Karen Fox has mentioned, to enable many, many, many young people, encourage them, make it possible. With Chaim, there was always the financial, practical piece. He was going to make sure that things got done. But first of all, was inspiring people to do it. And how Debbie, together with Karen and so many, many, many others, had their lives enriched and in some cases turned around towards truly active Jewish life through the camp experience. Chaim preceded me as the president of the Pacific Association of Reform Rabbis by several years. Every January, the Reform rabbis of the West Coast gather together in Palm Springs. It's a wonderful chavra. And today we primarily focus on study and collegiality. But in the earlier days, we used to take official stance on things. And this is what I'm remembering. And it has to do with camp. We have a camp committee that oversees now the successor of Camp Saratoga Swig, which is Camp Newman, as well as Camp Kalsman in Washington. And there was a grand debate. You know that the reform movement over the years there has been a strong move on the part of many towards a restudying and taking into our lives certain traditional practices within Judaism that maybe had been given up early on. Sometimes taken on en toto, sometimes in part, sometimes reinvigorated and renewed. And the specific issue that came before the camp committee and then they brought to the plenum had to do with the subject of kashrut. Now, the camp was not going to adopt a strictly kosher regimen, but there was a question concerning certain broad principles, and specifically in this case, the serving of meat and dairy together at a meal. The group was very divided, and the debate was lively. You can probably guess which side Rabbi Asa was on. He spoke, as we heard, from the heart and with vigor. With Chaim, you always knew where he stood. And that was a good thing. There could be disagreements, but there was a kind of honesty that we don't see so much. It's very refreshing. Anyway, he spoke passionately. Maybe Elaine remembers the outcome. I don't. I remember that it was by one vote. I know that it was that close. It was razor thin, and I think that what we might call the good side that year lost. I think it's been corrected. But it was that willingness to bridge the gap. Even senior rabbis in Orange County, I guess. To bridge the gap that we see going on within the Asa family. We see with, many of us were here last week when Rabbi Riskin spoke. And within the Reform movement, there is a wide difference of approach amongst many, but you need, Chaim always taught us, stand up. Stand up for what you believe, speak your truth, let the chips fall. But when the day is done, you know you've done right. A lesson that all of us who knew him and were touched by him will carry with us. Tehi nishmato tzrura b'tzrua chaim. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Amen.
My, oh my. Hugs, hugs, hugs. I'm going to move forward. Gordon Myers is first cousin to my sister-in-law, Michelle Asa. Gordon represents all of the hundreds of new immigrants who my father helped through the years transition into America, get approved for a line of credit, get a car, a home, a job. My father, having been a new immigrant himself in 1954, coming to America with basically nothing, was adopted by these people over here, by the Freibergs, by Jeffrey Freiberg's father, and knew that the most important thing to do for a new immigrant is to give them the tools to stand them on their feet while they make the transition into the new home. And so, Gordon, thank you.
I'm going to tell you a side of Rabbi Asa that maybe you don't know. He was a helpless gambler. After the initial shock that his son married an African, he found out that this African had two little African cousins running around America not knowing what to do. And we somehow were told about this rabbi in Fullerton that we should go and meet. And this we is my brother and I. Because our cousin married this rabbi, and there's this guy. So, of course, my brother and I thought the regular, we're going to go to the rabbi, we're going to have to go to shul, we're going to have to apologize. I mean, I hadn't spoken to a rabbi in about 13 years, and then it was, why aren't you in shul, and shh. So we came down to Fullerton from the San Fernando Valley. I don't know if any of you know where that is. Or when last you've been there. They've improved immigration a lot. I recommend it. So my brother came down with me, and we came to meet Rabbi Asa and his family. Of course, the minute we arrived, we saw this big red Cadillac in the driveway, and I thought, hey, maybe he knows Elvis. We had been in this country literally for 3 months maybe, and I had left South Africa, went to Israel, backpacked through about 11 different countries, came to America all alone, not a single phone number. Believe it or not, I was actually rooming with a Pakistani. If any of you would like to know what that's like, come and see me after. He was a great guy, and then my brother joined me, but the reason I will never, ever forget Rabbi Asa is because he did something that I never believed anybody would do for anybody. Now, you know, rabbis are very helpful, and they'll give you all the advice in the world and tell you what to do and what not to do. And this rabbi was no different. He said, the first thing you need to do in America is establish credit. And I looked at my brother and I go, what is he talking about? Many people gave us advice, but Rabbi Asa told us, he gave us an address, and he said, meet me on such and such a day at 9 o'clock at this place called the Commerce Bank. Being in the San Fernando Valley, we packed a lunch. And my brother and I went to the bank, and Rabbi Asa actually co-signed a credit card for my brother and I. Now, looking at me today, you may go, what's the big deal? But when I got here, I was 25 years old, looked like a beetle. I had jeans on that were really fashionable. They were full of holes and dented and, faded. $250 at the mall today. Not in those days, though. We had nothing, and Rabbi Asa went and signed these credit cards. But I tell you what the difference was, is that there were absolutely no conditions. Never once did he say, make sure you don't mess this up. I'll let you do this, but you have to do that. It was just unconditional. And so I stand here today, and Rabbi Asa is inside of me, because I remember that day. I always wanted to be somebody that could take a gamble, that could go out on a limb with a complete stranger. And the chances were that he was going to have to pay my credit card, which is what everybody might have thought looking at me. No job, long hair, whatever, spoke funny. He knew nothing about me. So today, I want to say that I'm not remembering Rabbi Asa for not being here anymore, but there are many incidences in my life where I try to behave in such a way that were inspired by Rabbi Asa.
Why? At first, Doug Stossnider was Chaim's boss at Metropolitan State Hospital, where Abba was a chaplain for 10 years after retiring from TBT. But over the decades, as they shared experiences, perspectives, and many lunches, I think, they became very close friends as well. Doug.
Oh, what a privilege to be here with all of you. And that's a hard act to follow, Gordon, my gosh. But I think you said something about unconditional, and I think of unconditional love when I think of Chaim. He didn't have conditions for us. He didn't expect anything. As Leora said, he came to work after this job. He was congregational rabbi here for 30-some years. We needed a rabbi at our hospital. The one we had, Rabbi Richard Edelson, got his PhD and went to work as a staff psychologist at the hospital. And some people would say, well, you demoted. You went from a rabbi to a psychologist. And I said, help me, Richard. How are we going to find someone to fill your spot? He said, call the board of rabbis. So I did. I called and spoke with Mark Diamond of the board of rabbis. He said, you know what? I think I might have just the guy for you. There's a fella in Fullerton that just retired. Now, let me talk with him. Let me see, if he's at all interested. Well, I think it was probably the next day I got a call from Chaim. And he said, I am interested. I actually did, for my rabbinical studies in rabbinical school, I did some type of a field work at our hospital in the 60s, I think the mid-60s. He goes, so I'd like to invite you to lunch. Come to lunch with me, and we'll talk about it. So we went to a Chinese restaurant. And, of course, Chaim, was watching what he could eat and things like that, and I watched that. And, boy, the Bulgarian accent. I remember very distinctly that first time sitting with him, really trying hard to understand what he was saying. And really having to stay focused. But what a blessing from that day on. Not only did he come to work for us, but as Leora said, he and I think, shared a very, very special friendship. We had many, many lunches, you're right. Chaim would say that the money he was making from the state of California was his lunch money. And I actually saw his paycheck once, and I think it was pretty much lunch money. Our chaplains really don't get paid all that well. There are some other benefits that were good, though, for him. And so what do you do as a rabbi, a chaplain, at a hospital? Well, Chaim came right in, and he talked about the old days of the 60s and how we had, at that time, about 3,000 patients at our hospital. That was before Ronald Reagan, that decided that we weren't going to pay for these people anymore and kind of opened the doors, and people, that's why we have a huge homeless, mentally ill problem in our community. Not to blame him, but just the conditions as they were from the 60s. When we had 3,000, and then when Chaim came to work, somewhere around 700. So he would compare, he would tell me, gosh, patients used to be all over the hospital when I was here in the 60s. And now we have like maybe 30, at most 40 patients that have what we call a grounds pass and could come out from their units and kind of utilize our grounds. We have a chapel on grounds, but we don't have enough patients really that can come to the chapel, so our chaplains come to them. So Chaim would provide services, go to all of our units. We have skilled nursing. While he was there, we had adolescent program. We have a forensic mentally ill population that has a fence around the building, and about 350 of our patients are there. So Chaim would go to all of these, all of our patients throughout the hospital, but not only did he do that, because our Jewish community usually hovers around maybe 30 or 40 people that are Jewish, we shared him, as we did previous rabbis. Rabbi Tversky, I remember that's a very prominent name in the Jewish community. And he was the rabbi when I first started working there as the chief of this department in 1990. Then we had Rabbi Edelson, and then after Rabbi Edelson was Rabbi Asa. But Chaim would go to other facilities. He would go to Patton State Hospital once a week. He would go to Fairview Developmental Center, and I think Chaplain Mary is here somewhere. I saw her. There you are. Hello. Our chaplains from our hospital wanted to be here today, too. However, they have a mean boss who wouldn't let them come, only because they have services right at this exact hour, and we couldn't get any substitutes. But they send their blessings to everyone. And Anyway, so he went to all of these. If that wasn't enough for Chaim, this is a retired guy in his 70s. He also went, I think, a lot of Sundays to the Correctional Institute for Women in Chino, because they didn't have a rabbi there. So he would go there and fell in love with these women, I tell you. And they, of course, loved him, just like our patients love Chaim. Our staff love Chaim. Again, that unconditional love. He had an amazing way of making you feel like you were the most important person to him. He did that to all of us. How did he do that? It really blows my mind. And in those 10 years that I was blessed to know him, I don't know if I'll ever know anyone like him again, because he's incredibly unique. As everybody has talked about him today, it just all kind of is fitting together. This tapestry of his life is amazing. Chaim, yeah, the cars. I bought one of his cars. He goes, "You want a Mercedes?" I go, "Yeah, I do, Chaim. You've got one?" "Yeah." I bought one, and here's the thing. Probably about 4 months after I bought it, the water pump went out. And, you know, Chaim, I still know the mechanics. Chaim led me to mechanics that I still use today. Armundo, some of you know Armundo, some of you know Willie. And so I have really great mechanics because of Chaim. But before I could get there to pick up the Mercedes after it was fixed, "Armundo, how much do I owe you?" "Oh, the bill's been paid." "What?" "Yeah, no, Rabbi was here earlier. He paid the bill." That's how he was. I told him, and I tried to pay him back too. There was no having that. Just like lunches, he would always, no, I got it. "Chaim, you got it last time. It's mine." "No, you got it last time." "No, I didn't, Chaim. You did." Anyway, so we had this thing he called, "I paid, you pray." So I got to pray a lot, because Chaim was always, we used to do this thing that the chaplains would box him out. You guys know basketball. We'd have to box him out so we could get to the check before he did. But that, again, was him. Amazing. Chaim broke some of the rules at the hospital. You're not allowed to accept gifts from patients, or you're not allowed to give them gifts. But many times Chaim brought things, and I kind of had to turn my head the other way as he gave things to patients. He never got in trouble for that. There was one time, though, he was wearing his leather sandals. They're like suede leather, really nice. And one of our patients said, "I really like those." He goes, "You like them?" He goes, "Yeah, can you get me a pair?" And Chaim goes, "Okay, what size do you wear?" He said, "Size 16. Chaim said, "Well, it might be difficult. I'll see what I can do." And I guess, I don't know for sure, but I heard he went to like maybe 4 or 5 different shoe stores, probably all over the LA area. And he got them and brought them to this patient. And that's just who he was. I kept telling him, "Chaim, you're not supposed to do that." It's favoritism with our patients, etc. But he enjoyed doing that. And he wasn't going to. He said sometimes our rules, in Chaim's word, they're stupid. They're stupid. He would tell jokes. And I actually told one of the jokes, one of his favorite jokes, and I won't tell it now, but those of you that remember the joke about the elephant and the mouse in the jungle, I told that joke at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, and boy, I got horror and shock from one side of the room, and the other room was just rolling in the aisles, laughing. They thought that was funny. He was so careful about never offending someone. Chaplain Mary, I know, he's probably told you the joke. He would say, like, and this one clearly was, really should have been, there was this Catholic priest. But he wouldn't say Catholic priest, he said the rabbi. The rabbi that lost his bike. And he said that he couldn't find that bike anywhere. And then someone came to confession. That means it really probably was a Catholic priest, right? But he goes, "Yeah, I came to confession for the rabbi, and he was confessing about adultery, and then the rabbi remembered where he parked his bike." And amazing. Last thing, and I am done. This was just something, I don't mean to offend anyone, but I keep this in my office. And Chaim once said to me, "What is that? What? I've noticed it in your room, and I don't know that everyone can see, but it's one of those things that kind of you have to focus your eyes or whatever." But Chaim, I guess, was always looking at the positive space. And I'd say, "No, Chaim, look at the negative space." So an artist would see negative space. Look at the spaces around the sticks. And it says Jesus, if you can see it. And so Chaim would study it, and study, he goes, "No," he goes, "I can't see Jesus." And I just want to end with that because, and always in the 10 years we knew each other, there was never a debate. He knew where I stood as a Christian. Obviously, I knew and totally respected the roots of the Jewish faith, and that's my roots too. And so, but we never debated it. In some of the events, and when he had Greg cater some of the Passover Seders at our hospital and all the hospitals, and we had, I know Miriam, you came to one of the events. That was really something. And a lot of volunteers from our community here that came. And but sometimes our patients would say at the Passover, "What about Jesus at the Passover?" And I've had rabbis kind of get a little frustrated with that, but Rabbi took it in stride. Rabbi Asa would say, "Yeah, Jesus, he had Passover. There was a Seder that he did as well, the Last Supper, And anyway, what a privilege it's been. This week has been amazing because I got to think about Chaim so much. And I'm sorry it took longer than 7 minutes by far. I appreciate it.
Wow. Dr. Lois Rubin. Lois and Bob Rubin raised their children at Temple Bet Tikva and were bringing up their kids at the same time that my parents were bringing us up. It was a time of growth and of second generation of TBT youth, and Lois was part of the teaching staff at the religious school. Thank you, Lois.
First of all, I want to thank you, Elaine, and Aviva, and Eliana, I see you there, and Ariel, and Leora. You all were students of mine here. Many moons ago. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll be in the middle here. When I think about dear Chaim of blessed memory, and by the way, I love this photograph of him right down there. So many memories and scenes just flash before me. We have known one another for half a century or more. I first met Chaim. I'm going back to my earliest memory of Chaim. I first met him somewhere in the 60s when he officiated at a B'nai B'rith dinner where both my husband Bob and my beloved late father, Jess Katzberg, were being installed as officers in B'nai B'rith. And Bob was the charter president of the new lodge here in Fullerton. So Rabbi Chaim was invited to give blessings. We had never met him before. So this young rabbi prances up to the podium, and as he's walking up toward the podium, we hear the clicking and clacking of the taps on his shoes. He was very young, he was very energetic, warm and welcoming, but those taps on his shoes left a very formative memory for me. As a young mother of three preschoolers and a young credentialed elementary school teacher, I became aware of my desire and my responsibility both to nourish my children with a Jewish spiritual connection and also grow my own spiritual connection. Once again, my path crossed with Rabbi Chaim, since I became the kindergarten teacher here at TBT for 7 years. One of my fondest memories of Chaim is not on the pulpit, is not addressing the religious school, and nobody's mentioned this yet. Every Shabbat, he would be, Officer Chaim, he would be out there in the parking lot, stopping every single car, making sure that children got into the parents' cars safely. But more importantly, he had to have a conversation with every single parent that came to pick up their kids from religious school. And everybody loved the schmoozing with Chaim. Over the years, Elaine and I became very close friends as we carpooled our kids to and from Hebrew and religious school. Bob and I were also very privileged to grow our friendship with both Elaine and Chaim, since together we facilitated many Jewish marriage encounter programs. Our families shared many memorable and fun simchas together. Looking back, I recognize that Chaim gave so much of himself, not just on a personal level or simply to our TBT family or to the kids in the religious and Hebrew schools, but he gave of himself so generously to the Fullerton interfaith community, various Orange County Jewish community organizations, the Orange County Jewish Federation, and Jewish Family Services. His international concerns and projects, of course, included Dear Israel and Bulgaria, etc., etc., etc. Beloved Chaim gave of himself and planted seeds everywhere he saw and felt the needs of others. What an example for all of us. He gave to so many of us here so many gifts of himself, whether it was a brief conversation, a hug, but always the inquiry about how are you and how is so-and-so in your family. His generosity at times was so incredible that it felt overwhelming. In 1976, Bob and I and our family returned from a 6-month journey in a motorhome. Our home was rented here, so we couldn't return home. Out of the generosity of some friends that happened to have a space in their front yard in Fullerton for us to park our motorhome. And then we had no car. All we had was this motorhome. But Chaim had cars. So Chaim generously loaned us. This was in the very early days. So this car that he loaned us was a real clunker. But it got us where we needed to go, and we were so grateful to him for loaning us that car. He gave generously, expecting either a little or a lot in return, depending upon others' enthusiasm for whatever project to which he had committed himself. Chaim had not asked me for a favor since the late 60s and early 70s during my religious school teaching days and during our kids' bat and bar mitzvahs trainings, when we didn't always agree. Last year, as he was becoming weaker, he asked me if I could do him a favor and teach him some healing meditations. And he asked me if I would consider teaching him some Jewish healing meditations that he could then incorporate into his prayer practice. His request touched me so deeply. I am so grateful for the opportunity and the privilege that Chaim gave to me. He gave me a gift that I will always cherish. I feel so privileged, honored, and blessed to have been his colleague and his friend. May Chaim's name always be for a blessing. And Chaim, I have a sense that you're sharing all of your wonderful qualities over there.
We've gotten to the future. No, to the present. We are at the present. Melissa Fisher. Melissa was another one of Chaim's adopted children who he loved and mentored from the time she was a small child until a few days before he died. She represented a newer generation growing up at TBT that he was lucky enough to call his own. I had the pleasure of getting to know Melissa during my father's Shiva last year, and I realized that she is like a soul sister, and I'm not surprised that he adopted you. And by the way, Melissa is our last speaker for the afternoon. So that's a lot of burden on you, huh? A lot of responsibility.
So if you have to go to the bathroom, hold it. Rabbi Zahavi-Asa. We were on a first-name basis. I called him Rabbi. It truly became his name, his identity, his calling. I was so honored to be asked to speak here today, but I was having trouble deciding what to speak about for a few reasons. One, I have new baby brain. Two, there are so many things I could talk about, it was hard to decide where to begin. And of course, three, I told my best Rabbi-Asa story a year ago when we honored his memory in this very room about when he blindsided my 14-year-old self and my parents with a trip to Hebrew Union College to meet the Dean of Admissions of the Rabbinic School. If you missed that story, I just gave you the punchline, so don't worry about it. So you can see I was at a bit of a loss. So I did what any 34-year-old graduate, educated parent would do. I asked my daddy for help. He asked me one question. Do you remember any rabbi in your life before Rabbi-Asa? My answer was no. My dad said, Rabbi-Asa was your rabbi for your whole life, and that's where you start. I breathed a sigh of gratitude, and I could begin. He was right. I have witnessed 4 rabbis at TBT and one on the way. I went to a Jewish university crawling with rabbis. I was a member of a large temple in the San Fernando Valley. We all know where that is now. When I lived there, that had 3 rabbis on staff. I have friends that are rabbis, but none of them were ever my rabbi. I had a rabbi. I was able to begin, not just because Rabbi-Asa was my rabbi, but because I realized he was everyone's rabbi. Touching people's hearts and souls was his gift. And he was not just my rabbi, he was my mentor, my family, and even with 50 years between us, he was my friend. You see, not only do I not remember a rabbi before Rabbi-Asa, I don't remember life before Rabbi-Asa was in it. I was 2.5 in January of 1983 when we moved here and joined TBT. My family's connection to Rabbi is very clear. My mom has type 1 diabetes like Rabbi did. She and my father went to a meeting for a new clinical trial. My dad turned to her and said, "Isn't that our new rabbi?" They went up to say hello. Mom and Rabbi share the same strong, tenacious spirit and the will to be always seen as a survivor and not a patient. The connection was immediate and permanent. I like to think I'm a humble person. I know who I am, and I put others first. My ego's in check. But to Rabbi, I was special. I know, you're all thinking we were all special to Rabbi. And you're right. By pure definition, you would think that everyone being made to feel special would somehow nullify the feeling. But it never did. This is because Rabbi had a superpower, a gift, if you will, the gift of making everyone feel special because he truly believed they were. He dug deep to find that special thing in everyone. I'm sure sometimes he had to dig a little deeper than others, but he always found it. He also remembered people and made them feel like old friends after just one meeting. An example of this. A few years back, we were at a birthday dinner for one of us, maybe for him. The waitress recognized him and launched into one of those, I'm the cousin of so-and-so, neighbor to someone's postman kind of explanations. I, apparently of little faith, held my breath when Rabbi took a second and said, of course, Ralph's cousin. I remember the event we met, and launched into details while holding her hand and telling her how lovely it was to see her. She left the table beaming and a little teary-eyed. I looked around the table, and we all, including, or maybe especially Elaine, shrugged, shook our heads, and chuckled a little, thinking, how does he do that? With his gift, he made us feel special. From personally greeting and pulling each student out of the car in the morning for religious school, to magically showing up the second you were at the hospital for the minutest of reasons, this was evident. I don't know why he made me extra special and singled me out, but he did. Maybe I needed it more than others. After all, I have a great family. I had everything going for me. But for some reason, when I was young, my self-esteem didn't always match that. Rabbi Asa and what he helped create here at Temple Beth Tikva, from the ECLC Early Childhood Learning Center up, saved my life. He helped me feel like a big fish in a small pond. I excelled here. I was important. I was heard. I was loved, and I was home. This gave me the opportunity to build the self-esteem I needed and be successful and have the amazing life that I have today. He made me feel special in big gestures, such as the noted HUC trip, asking me to guest rabbi for a Shabbat while he was away in Bulgaria, and being one of 3 guest speakers at his retirement party, all while still in high school. It was the little ways he could make you feel special as well, with a kind word, a wink, or a hug, or of course the famous elbow nudge after he made some sort of inappropriate joke, and he'd give you that big mischievous smile. Rabbi also made it clear he was proud of me, but that he wanted more. I was blessed to find my besheret and for Rabbi to marry us. During the ceremony, to our embarrassment, but not our surprise, he made it clear that Jonathan and I were to have children, sooner rather than later. We weren't getting any younger. When we bought a home, Rabbi came to hang our mezuzot and give blessings, long-winded blessings, which included that we were to fill the home with children sooner rather than later. Okay, let me take an aside to say that the man had faults. He had no filter, and he could be blunt and inappropriate, but when someone has a superpower, it helps for them to have a flaw, to remind you that they're human and that you can strive to be as great as they are. This was just one of the many things I loved about him. Okay, back to my point. The day before he died, John and I went to sit at his bedside as we had been summoned by Elaine, who is the only one I know who can match him in tenacity. We didn't stay long, as his children were landing and gathering soon, and we didn't want to use up too much of his energy. He had trouble speaking at that point. I held his hand for a while when I got there, and when he finally opened his eyes and saw me, his smile and eye twinkle said enough. He did, however, manage to get out the words to John, take care of my girl. And John leaned in and promised and said he was also working hard to comply with his baby-making wishes. He opened his eyes again, smiled, raised his eyebrows, and winked. Exactly 1 month to the day after his death, we found out we were pregnant with our now 2-month-old son, Noah. And sitting here, I realized that in the clinical 10-month gestation period, that means I was already pregnant when he died. I can't help thinking he is still running things to his liking from up there. Last month, Elaine came over to hang and bless the last of our mezuzahs at our home on Noah's nursery door. It was bittersweet, but although Rabbi wasn't there in person, I couldn't help but think none of us might have been at that moment if it hadn't been for him. I know I'm not alone amongst my generation here at TBT, or frankly, many of you in the room today, when I say, on behalf of all of us, Rabbi Asa made me feel special, which made me participate, which helped form my love for Judaism and my Jewish identity, and a better love of myself. For that, we can all be thankful.
Wow, you guys made it. An amazing audience, amazing storytellers, amazing love, amazing community. And you well deserve an amazing dinner, late lunch. Each of you, I'm sure, has a Chaim story. Go out into the reception, introduce yourselves to whoever you're sitting next to. Make friends, new friends, old friends, share stories. B'tei avon, bon appetit, enjoy, and we welcome you to a lovely afternoon.